Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Susan Welton, Oracle Marketing Manager at Perficient, and I'm excited to be moderating today's webinar, A Remote Delivery Success from EBS and Hyperion to Oracle Cloud. Time permitting, we will have a Q&A session at the end of today's event, so please type your questions into the Q&A tab located to the right of your screen, and feel free to do that any time throughout today's webinar. Two questions often come up with our online events. Can I get a copy of the slides and a link to the recording? The answer to both questions is yes. We will email you with that information on how to access both the slides and the recording following today's event. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce today's speakers, Trey Karlovich, EVP and CFO, and Karla Otis, Vice President, Business Process at NGL Energy Partners, as well as Matt Makowski, Director ERP Practice, and Don Ford, Director EPM Practice at Perficient. I'll tell you a little bit more about the speakers, so who's going to share the story with you today? Trey currently serves as NGL Energy Partners Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. He has more than 15 years of experience in the energy industry, including executive roles in finance and accounting. As VP Business Process at NGL, Karla was directly responsible for the new ERP and EPM solutions implementation. She has more than 15 years of experience in the energy industry, including executive roles in audit and accounting. Matt Makowski has more than 20 years of experience in Oracle financial applications, which includes large-scale, global, full lifecycle implementations across industries and countries. Matt is director at Perficient and has been running the ERP Cloud business unit for the past 5 years. Don is an accomplished Hyperion applications consultant with more than 18 years of experience in information technology consulting. He has extensive experience with business process analysis, business process reengineering, and project program management. I'm going to briefly walk you through today's agenda. As I mentioned, we just had our introductions. We are going to start with really the NGL story. That's what you're all here for today. So Trey and Karla are going to walk you through some of the challenges that they had with their legacy business process. They'll address why they actually chose to go to Oracle Cloud. Then the directors of our EPM and our ERP practices are going to speak to project scope and the value of business process design, the true value of being able to integrate these two solutions, and what were the benefits that they realized. And then, as I said, we should have an opportunity for Q&A at the end of today's session. So again, feel free to jot your questions down in that tab at any point in time. So just a brief introduction to who Perficient is. If you're unfamiliar with Perficient, we're a publicly traded company. We have about 4,500 colleagues worldwide, and we're really known as a global digital consultancy. And our focus as a company is really on helping some of the world's biggest brands and leading companies connect with their customers and grow their business. That's really what we're all about. One of the points that I really like to highlight on this particular slide is our repeat business rate at 90%. It's a metric that we're really proud to share, and I think it really reflects that our strong commitment that we have to customer success. As a global delivery company, we have locations across the United States. We're up to, I believe it's 25 offices now in the US alone. We have offices in Latin America, Europe, India, China, and in Lafayette, Louisiana, we have a delivery center that I think it's been about 2 or 3 years we've had that local delivery center there in Lafayette, Louisiana. It's certainly a differentiator for Perficient. I want to touch a little bit upon our Oracle practice now, just kind of give you a little background on the Oracle National Business Unit. We're really quite diverse in our capabilities. As you can see, we have what we call solution expertise, our multi-pillars. We have enterprise resource planning, we have supply chain management, we have human capital management, enterprise performance management, analytics, and then we also have a training group. We've had a dedicated practice supporting Oracle, been an Oracle partner for nearly 20 years now. One of the things from an Oracle perspective we're particularly proud of is our solution specializations that we have. which currently we're at more than 15 specializations. The 3,000 deployment figure, it's probably a little shy of what's actual, but that really is representative of all of our practices and all of the successful projects that we have delivered over these nearly 20 years. There are a number of industries that we serve, as you can see there, from healthcare, financial services, energy, oil, and gas, that we're very proud to have deep and rich expertise in. And the last comment I wanted to make is really the fact that Gartner and Forrester have recognized us as a provider in this particular space. At this point in time, I'd really like to hand it over to Trey and Karla to share the NGL Energy Partners success story. That's really what you're here to hear and listen. So Trey, I'm going to hand it over to you. Take it away.
Great, thanks Susan, and thanks everybody for joining today. Hopefully you gained some understanding of the journey that we've gone down as NGL. I think everybody will have their own unique journey. Ours was definitely unique in that we got to implement a new system through a pandemic. A little bit about NGL. So we are a large midstream company, so focused in the energy sector. We have three primary business segments: water handling and disposal, crude oil logistics, and a liquids and refined products marketing business. So each business is extremely unique. Each has different processes, different revenue streams, different leadership, different styles, and is actually managed from different locations. So we have multiple locations, three primary corporate settings. Our main corporate office is located in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have a large corporate office in Denver, Colorado, and another corporate office in Houston, Texas. On top of that, we have a couple hundred locations across the United States. So anything we do from a system perspective touches multiple people in different organizations throughout the country. So this is not something that we look at it as one location or one group of individuals will be interacting with a system. We have with our systems, we have, again, multiple people dealing with those. We're, as I mentioned, a large business. We have over $7 billion in revenue. That was in fiscal year 2020, $6 billion in assets. And as I mentioned, we are publicly traded also on the NYSE under the ticker NGL. NGL has been built over the past about 10 years, primarily through acquisitions. And what comes with acquisitions? Well, systems. So we have multiple accounting systems, multiple operational accounting systems, different processes designed for each of those systems that were developed by the companies that we acquired. We have worked diligently to try to consolidate those processes. And this conversation we're going to have is about the system that we ultimately chose, the path we went down to consolidate our processes, and then where we're going from here.
Hey Trey, great, thanks. Matt Mikowski here. Just real quick question. 2020 was a very tough and challenging year, as you mentioned. On top of everything else, on top of the pandemic, you're installing a new ERP system. Oil prices went negative at one point. Is there anywhere in your business that with this downturn in the industry that thrived, or at least maybe outperformed some of the others, or at least held their own? How did NGL do during this time?
Yeah, Matt. I mean, all of our businesses are focused in the energy sector. As everybody is aware, crude prices have been extremely volatile through history, but particularly in 2020. I think it's the first time we've seen crude prices go negative, and not only negative by a couple dollars, minus $35 to $40 a barrel. So you could actually get paid to take a barrel of oil back in last spring. It's definitely a unique opportunity. We pride ourselves at NGL in being diversified. That's one of our core values, and one of the things that we've founded the business on, so that we can manage through these types of commodity cycles. One of our thoughts is, if you just do one thing, then that one thing could go away, and when it does, you lose your business. So we have multiple businesses that can be resilient through commodity price cycles. Now, that being said, we're still in the energy business, and so when crude goes negative and has the volatility that it has, it's going to have an impact on our portfolio. Our water business, for example, saw a significant decline in volumes. Our transportation business, again, a significant decline in volumes. We sell refined products, which is gasoline and diesel fuel. Well, in a pandemic, when nobody's driving, you have a decline in demand for your products. On the flip side, though, we have businesses that can store and hold products. That actually was a benefit over the past year. So you had an offset to some of those declines. Overall, though, 2020, like everybody, was a challenging year for us from a business perspective. Again, we had some resiliency, and we're pleased about that. It helped support the company, but like everybody, we faced the same challenges in 2020 from an operational perspective, much less what we've been trying to do from a systems and accounting perspective.
Right, completely understood. I appreciate that. Thanks for the insight into the ongoings and during this tough time.
Yeah, no, it's 2020 was it's a year I don't think any of us will ever forget as much as we want to.
No doubt about that.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why we needed to make a change. I've been at NGL for 5 years. The first request I had when I walked in the door was from our corporate controller, who came in and said, Trey, we're glad you're here. We want to do a new system implementation and consolidation. If anybody remembers 5 years ago, that was also a challenging time in the energy market when we had $20 crude. And that was probably not an ideal time to try to go through a system implementation. What I asked of the team was, well, let me understand what we're looking at. What are we facing? And this slide kind of summarizes what we had. We had outdated systems at that point in time. We had Oracle EBS. We had another GL system for a portion of our business. It was Microsoft AX. We had no fixed asset system. We had multiple operational accounting systems, and some of those, while they may have been on the same platform, were in different versions that were feeding into data warehouses in order to manage our reporting profile. So it was a very clunky setup. We didn't have a procurement process, so that meant we had lots of paper, very inefficient. We have over the past 4 to 5 years, we were able to roll out a scanning process for invoices and try to automate some of those things. But again, they were one-off systems, one-off processes, which caused for a lack of consistency. And that was the biggest challenge that we faced, is that we have had inconsistent processes across multiple organizations that we're trying to report on from a public company perspective. That had some challenges from an audit perspective, definitely challenges from a SOX perspective. And so we had to make a change just from there. But the biggest challenge that we had was from managing our business. We could not provide accurate, timely information to decision makers. We were able to, report our quarterly reports and our annual reports, and we were able to get those things done. We were able to close our books on a monthly basis, but we couldn't tell a project manager where he was on his AFE. If he was under budget, over budget, that was not information that we could prepare on a real-time basis. Lots of times it would take multiple days to source information. Well, over multiple days, that information can change. So there was inconsistency, and you didn't have one version of the truth. And that's one of the things that we looked at as we were trying to decide where we need to move from a systems perspective, is how do we get to one version of the truth. As I mentioned, we have multiple what I call operational accounting systems that feed into our reporting. We have systems used for measurement of volumes. We have systems used for contracts and for the transactions that we enter into on a daily basis. We pay royalties on our crude oil division, so we have to have a system that tracks the royalties. So a lot of ancillary systems feeding into our ERP and our GL system. As I mentioned, each system had its own separate chart of accounts. So we had inconsistency about what we would record to your normal trade receivable account versus and other receivables and things of that nature. So this was caused additional challenges in reporting on a consistent basis. A lot of customization. So we built custom reports. We spent a lot of time and energy focused on customizing everything, which meant that you couldn't upgrade or modify anything without it impacting a different system. So that became a big challenge of ours also. And then, as I mentioned, we've been a very acquisitive business. We grew through acquisitions primarily. We disposed of some companies as well, and then we bought new companies. So as you acquire companies, we wanted to find something that was scalable, rather than adopting the systems and the processes of the acquiree. We were rolling out our processes and our systems for the businesses that we were acquiring. So we had to make a decision, and we didn't take it lightly. As I said, this started prior to me coming to NGL. We took several years to evaluate different options. We looked at multiple systems, multiple versions of systems, and we settled on Oracle Cloud. The cloud technology has come a long ways, even in the few years that we've been evaluating this. What we wanted was, again, consistency. We wanted to eliminate customization. We wanted best practices. That's been a big key theme. In fact, one of the things that we told our system implementation team was, you need to tell us no. We are going to keep coming to you and say, no, that's not how we do things. That's not how we do things. No, we want to do this a different way. And we wanted Matt and the team to tell us no, say, no, that's not the way. That's not a best practice. That's not the way that the system's designed. This is the best practice, and this is why it's a best practice. We were pretty successful in that. We obviously, every company is unique, and so there are going to be a few customizations here or there, but I think we've done a very good job of trying to make sure that we used an out-of-the-box best practice within the system. So that was something that was extremely important for us. We wanted consolidated data. Again, our data was sitting in multiple areas. I go back to this one version of the truth. There were multiple versions, and none of them were true. So we've been very keen on trying to pull all of our data into one source for reporting, and Oracle Cloud can do that. The way that we've rolled out the system is we're pulling data in from those ancillary systems on a real-time basis, so that we can report from one place, and that's going to be Oracle Cloud. Simplified IT and support. These on-premise systems that require upgrades on a regular basis. Now we get upgrades every quarter. We're always on the cutting edge. It has its other challenges, which Karla will be talking about here shortly, but that was something that we thought was important. And then being able to be scalable. So, when we were looking at the different systems, Oracle Cloud can scale up, but we could also scale it back down if we need to. So again, our business, we know it will grow. We know there will be times that it will shrink. We are active in the M&A arena, and so we needed something that could work for us that way.
Hey Trey, Matt again. So a couple, one comment and then a question. I think as you alluded to, pushing the SCI to push back and provide the best practice input. I feel like one of the biggest areas where we were successful as a project as a whole was that chart of accounts. From a change management perspective, you did have two different charts of accounts, and they did have these customer and supplier segments built in. And I think as we kind of redeveloped or redesigned your chart, we said, hey, some of the best practices here, when you look at what other companies do, you avoid putting any kind of subledger type segments into your chart of accounts. And one of the things we did, and I think successfully, and that's mentioned on the slide here, is that accounting hub. We were able to use accounting hub to get the customer and supplier information at the detail level, as well as the other subledgers, as well as using accounts payable and accounts receivable, and pulling all that information into Accounting Hub, thereby making all the data available in the subledger, right? So we didn't have to rely on that chart of accounts, and we could streamline your segmentation now, make that a bit easier. And then just as a question, I mean, reading all this and listening to what you have to say, do you feel like you got what, in the end, what you bargained for? Was it worth it? Is the company starting to see the benefits?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did have pretty unique, different chart of accounts in both of our two legacy general ledger systems, and that was something that took a lot of time and effort and thought to try to consolidate and bring that to one consistent chart of accounts that would work the way that we wanted it to. It was a big endeavor, and I think we were successful, and I think we haven't landed in a good place. We're still evolving here, though, Matt. I mean, one of the things that we've been in the cloud for 4 months now. Each month's getting better. I think each day is actually getting a little bit better, although some days have other challenges than the day before. There's still a lot of work for us to do to get to where we want to be. I think we see a light at the end of the tunnel. We understand what the systems opportunities are. So I think it's definitely been worth it. I think we've still have a long ways to go. As many of you can imagine, rolling into a brand new accounting and reporting system is not an easy task, and you're not gonna snap your fingers and be where you want to be, on go live. That's just not the way that these things work. Many of us have gone through these in the past. They're challenging from a time perspective. They're challenging on the morale of your people. They're challenging from a cost perspective. There's a lot of things that you have to manage. But I'll tell you, at some point, you're suffering so much pain in just trying to run your normal processes that it's absolutely worth it. And I think that this is, in our situation, it was definitely worth it. Like I said, there's still work to do. But I can already start to see how people are being freed up from some of the mundane, prior routine tasks that they were just having to key through, to where they can start, thinking about things from a analytical perspective. They've been able to build reports that now generate themselves dashboards that you can see in the system on a real-time basis. There's always going to need to be improvements around those, but we're getting to where we're starting to stand on 2 feet now, and hopefully here in the not too distant future we'll be walking and running.
Great. No, great news. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it's making forward progress for you.
Yeah. So some of our goals and objectives, I've touched on a lot of this, but we have had multiple systems, feeding into historically data warehouses. We had multiple GL systems that then we had to try to merge those together from a reporting perspective, and it was just inefficient. We're not as effective as we wanted to be. So we laid out these goals. These goals were actually laid out before we started the project. We understood we needed to make a change. We vetted different systems. We made the decision from a steering committee and management perspective to go with Oracle Cloud, and then we built a vision. We built some goals and objectives. We vetted different system implementation teams. Candidly, we actually didn't have Perficient at the top of that list initially. We were talking to other firms, and we were led to Perficient as somebody that we should meet with, and at the end of the day, we found that they had similar thoughts and ideas. We spoke the same language. The communication flowed very easily in the discussions we had with the Perficient team, and they were able to come in and help us with this quote unquote journey. But we had to lay out what are our goals and what are our objectives and what are we ultimately trying to do, and really bring the team together around this, because everybody knew this was going to be a daunting task. So we really tried to make this a team effort. We went with the slogan Capstone. So Capstone was something that our project team came up with. It's an acronym for consolidating accounting processes and systems by transforming them into one ERP. And we, as I mentioned, we had multiple systems, multiple processes, multiple accounting teams, multiple business teams. We needed to get everybody speaking the same language and working off of the same sheet of paper. So we laid that out from the very get-go, is that we really need to have, this needs to be one, and we need to work on this together. There's not a Tulsa way or a Denver way. There's not a water way or a crude way. There just needs to be the NGL way. And so that was something that was important to us, and we think is important when you're starting any project of this size or this nature, is you really need to lay out your goals and your objectives from the get-go.
Just to remark on the logo and the slogan, it's kind of remarkable that you've got the word Capstone, which is a real thing, right, in the industry, and in it, kind of the letters, the acronyms map out perfectly to what your objectives were. And I mean, it all makes sense. Very rarely do I've had project names like Project Phoenix and Project Genesis and a bunch of other ones, and that they never really map to the objectives. So I mean, I know NGL actually, it is worth it. I mean, people think it's what's in a logo, what's in a slogan. It does bring the project together into one theme. So that was great work on the NGL side to pull that together amongst all the other things.
Yeah, what's amazing is it actually came out of our accounting group. So no marketing or IR was factored into that. So we have some creative accountants as well.
For sure.
So jumping into some of the project management, this was also where we had to spend some time thinking about how are we going to run this project, and that's where Karla came in. So I'll let Karla do some talking now, but Karla has been with the company for a long time. She's served in numerous roles. She's had previous experience managing large projects. She understood the business from a business perspective, not just an accounting or process perspective. We thought that was very important from a leader and from a project manager perspective. But she understood how controls work. She understood how the different departments interact and work together. And so, we thought that as we're putting together what this project team needs to look like, the leader needs to be able to touch a lot of different areas, and then also be able to promote a team and drive a team. So, I don't think that Karla understood exactly what she was going to be getting into. I don't think any of us did once we kicked this thing off. But I'll let Karla talk a little bit about some of the challenges we faced from a project management perspective.
Thanks, Trey. Yeah, no, I don't think I knew what I was getting into. Having been at NGL so long, there were many facets that were uncovered as we went through this project. We've kind of outlined some of the high-level challenges that we incurred throughout the span of this project that actually is still going on. We're in the midst of phase 2. But first and foremost, kind of like the slide deck talks about, probably our first challenge was, in the midst of a pandemic, we had to turn on a dime and go remotely. That was fairly new for NGL. We weren't a remote organization. We were very much in the office. We had completed our requirements, pretty much completed our requirements gathering phase, and Matt, keep me honest if I misspeak a little bit, in the office. And then, as everyone else had to do in March of 2020, we had to turn on a dime and go remote. So that presented its own challenges in, like Trey said, we had a large organization. We span multiple locations, multiple technologies, multiple businesses. So we have business segments that have different processes. We have people all over the country and multiple financial systems. not only NGL, but also Perficient had to go remote fairly quickly. And then we were all spread out across time zones. So, when you're at midnight trying to schedule a meeting and figuring out who's in what time zone and what works can get a little bit crazy as well. And then we had, as Trey mentioned, we have multiple interfacing systems, all with different technologies. All of those interfaces had to be completely rewritten. And on top of that, we chose a new platform, a new technology platform, Informatica, to go with. So not only were we trying to figure out how Oracle Cloud worked, we were also trying to learn a new technology tool and rewrite these interfaces from scratch. Our business resources, they were not 100% dedicated to the project. We had a small team that was pretty much 100% dedicated, but when you look out across everyone involved, it was a very small chunk of the project team that was 100% dedicated. IT still had to manage all of the other systems that were still in production and troubleshoot those. Accounting and the business still had to run. We couldn't stop to do this project. So that put a huge strain on the different team members across the organization at varying times throughout the project. And again, as we continue through phase 2, that's still a stress. NGL is a lean organization, like many are these days. And it's not like we had a lot of people sitting around with excess time. Was there a question?
Karla, I was going to add to that. One of the things that from a management perspective, executive management perspective, you look at is where do you put your talent? And with a system implementation like this, you need to put your good people on the system because that's what you're going to be living in the future. But you also need your good people to continue to do their day job and close the books. And so balancing who you assign to the project, who you put on the project from a full-time perspective, and where you pull those resources from, and how do you backfill those resources. That was a big challenge that I think everybody faces when you look at a project like this. And again, that puts stress on your people, and it generally puts stress on your good people, which again is something that you have to try to figure out a way to balance. And I don't know if we did a great job with that. I think we did a good job, but were still times where we had to say, look, some of our people need a break. Some of our people are being pulled in too many different areas. Where do you find resources to fill in on a short time or a part-time basis in certain areas? Where do you get certain expertise? But you also want to develop your team in the new system so that when you do go live, you have some experts that are in your house, so that you're not reliant on third parties or outside parties to manage your day-to-day once you go live. So that was a major project challenge that we encountered, and that I think many people face as they go through these types of implementations.
Yeah, that's a great point, Trey. And kind of along that same lines, not just the project team, but as far as how we were going to operate our business in the future cloud world. And I have this bullet about realignment of job responsibilities and reporting structures. Along with multiple business segments, we had multiple processes and reporting structures, and trying to figure out how you transition from that into cloud functionality, because we wanted to go out of the box. We did not want to customize. You have to realign your resources and how people do their jobs. That was something I think was probably briefly discussed early on, but it kind of smacked us in the face in the midst of the project in trying to figure out who should be doing what, how to manage our SOX controls and segregation of duties, and when to make those changes. And so that was something we spent countless hours on, documenting and defining who does what now and how we think it should happen in the future. And then when do you pull the trigger and make those changes? So that was a big challenge. Several of us on the team spent countless hours figuring out how to resolve those issues. Matt, did you have something you wanted to say there?
Yeah, just a comment. I've worked on many, projects, I'll say hundreds over all the years. This being clear, I think one of our most successful, I mean, it's one of the top 2 or 3 projects I can remember working on that was as successful it was and in the time frame that we did it and the new technology that we're implementing. So I just want to say that, this success was NGL's. We're just the consulting firm, right? I mean, we bring people to the table that help get through these best practices and software challenges or solutions related to the business process and mapping it in software. But the team that was brought to the table at NGL, and this is important for everyone that's listening, is to understand it's got to be, it's the better that team, the more uniquely qualified they are. And NGL's staff was very uniquely qualified, I felt, to handle each of their areas, do their day jobs, by the way, and I think some of them had 2 or 3 day jobs, and run the project and get everything done, build a new chart of accounts, and from, all the way from, I'll say IT, all the way through the business processes, all the way up through to the executive team. This was, again, just a very uniquely qualified team. I think one of the best I've worked with. So lots of kudos to the NGL team, despite the feeling of the challenge. I mean, you guys definitely met the challenge. And just, quick question about the scope change. We mentioned, bringing in accounting hub and projects, procurement. I think projects and procurement, most people understand what those things are. In terms of accounting hub, Karla, could you just briefly explain what that brought to the table, why that was so important?
Yeah, that was something that was a little bit unexpected for us. We had not really talked about it, but as we got into as we finished requirements gathering and got into early testing phases, we kind of uncovered the need. As we completed our chart of accounts rationalization, we determined that we really needed to be able to record our accruals at the customer and supplier segment. I think Matt touched on this earlier. Through the rationalization process, we took that out of the chart of accounts. So when we got to the point that we were looking at accruals, we had to be able to record and report at the customer and supplier level, and we did not have that ability in the GL. So it was really a no-brainer for us between that and then just the sheer volume of transactions we had going through the GL on a month-to-month basis. It turned out Accounting Hub was a no-brainer. We had to select it and put it in the midst of the project.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. So like Matt said, we had multiple scope changes throughout the early phases of the project, Accounting Hub being one of them. Our initial plan was just to implement the core ERP modules, meaning AR, AP, GL, fixed assets, and cash management. And then we were going to bring in the EPM modules, projects, and procurement in a later phase. As we got into the testing, as we got through the chart of accounts rationalization, we just really determined that we had to bring forward Accounting Hub. We had to implement Accounting Hub, but then we had to bring in projects. It just didn't make sense not to bring in projects for reporting purposes. And then as we also realized that the solution that Perficient provided was a great solution for holding off on implementing the EPM modules, meaning the close and consolidation, the enterprise data management systems. There was a kind of a workaround solution till we implemented in a later phase. It was just too costly for NGL. It was too much work. And we just felt like we should just put our heads down and just go ahead and move forward with the EPM modules in that first phase. Let's see. And then, like I said, the remote, working remotely, it had its upsides and its downsides. And I think we have a slide later on to discuss a little bit more about that. And then finally, one thing that we really didn't ever talk about or think about was the monthly and quarterly release cycle. With EPM, you're on a monthly update, and with the ERP modules, you're on quarterly. And so 2 months after we went live, we were looking at a major ERP quarterly release. We weren't really mentally prepared for that. It was a lot of effort and a lot of scrambling at the last minute, but that's something I would strongly recommend you factor into your process is how you're going to take and test those monthly and quarterly releases.
You know, Perficient offers this cloud concierge service, and I know this is, since you just went live and you just signed on for the service, can you tell us a little bit about what drove you to pick and choose the cloud concierge that we offer, and how that may have, how that can help you with the monthly or quarterly updates?
Absolutely. You know, we had hoped shortly after go live, we would be ready to stand on our own 2 feet and manage the entire project on our own after hypercare ended. Like I mentioned, like Trey mentioned, we are a very lean organization. Our IT staff, while they are absolutely tremendous, they have a lot on their plates, and they have 2 and 3 jobs like most people do. And so we kind of found ourselves nearing the end of hypercare, worried about how we were going to continue to manage all of the tickets that were coming in and the production support. And so reached out to Matt and team, and that's really why we determined, you know, we're just not ready to do this on our own. And so we signed up for the cloud concierge services with Perficient.
Awesome.
One other thing to add, you know, we did our best to cross-train throughout the life of the project. We had many cross-training sessions with Perficient and IT and the business process team, and we did our best to be ready for that. But just, you know, when push came to shove and we got to the end of the project, we weren't ready. The interfaces consumed a significant amount of our time, and so we really needed to rely on Perficient to help us get through the couple months after go live.
And we're glad you can rely on us, Karla. So thanks for that.
Sure, it's been great.
That's great, thank you. All right, I am actually going to skip a couple slides here because I really do want to continue with the NGL story. We're going to skip over the methodology slides and just talk about this remote delivery, because this was very unique to your project. But I tend to feel like it's going to, you know, be a mainstay in the industry, is that a lot of projects would be delivered remotely, if nothing else, to save on the cost of travel. Travel expenses can range between 10 and 20% depending on the locations. So, you know, I'm going to presume for the moment that there's not going to be another pandemic, that we're near the end of this one, hopefully. I just thought we would chat a little bit about, you know, some of the anecdotal type stories that we've all had, and how we got through the challenges. You know, I've been traveling 22 years, Sunday through Thursday. Despite that fact, my kids turned out to be pretty good. Not sure their names or their ages, but they seem to be doing okay. At least one has made it to college to date. You know, but this was a very challenging. I thought traveling was challenging, right? I thought I was exhausted from traveling. I am more exhausted from working at home through the pandemic, because the hours of work are, you know, 7 in the morning to 7, 8, or 9 o'clock at night. In other words, there's no downtime, right? Everyone just assumes you're available, you're not traveling, you're free to speak. So the day, I'm sure many people on the phone and the line listening have experienced this as well. So I can imagine, Trey and Karla, you know, the impact that this had on your team. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things you experienced? I don't know, morale, or, you know, other type of activities, or other types of things that came out of this for you?
Sure, and I can start. Trey, feel free to jump in as well. I mean, you're right, Matt. It was, you know, before you know it, you look down at your clock and you've been put in a 14-hour day, days and days on end. As a project team, we were not good at setting work hours. We were not good at shutting down our computer and walking away. We all wanted to get it in. We wanted to be absolutely the best product that we could possibly put in. But, you know, when you're sitting on your couch and you hear your email being, it's hard to just not walk over to your computer and go, I can answer one more question. I can solve one more problem. And that's how this whole project team was about everything. They wanted it right. They wanted to answer every question. They wanted to help everyone they could. But it was physically and mentally exhausting. There's never any getting away from it. So we definitely, from a project perspective, you know, everybody had their ups and everybody had their downs, and we just kind of talked each other through it. Is a fantastic team to work with. I think we still struggle here and there as we go into phase 2 and worry that we don't want to end up where we were with phase 1 and working all those hours. And your bullets here are right on. You know, you need to set core working hours, even if they're a little bit longer. You need to take breaks throughout the day. You know, it's hard to sit at a desk for 14 hours, just solid working away. So, but you know, we did what we had to do to get the product in. I think we ended up with a really great implementation, and we just continue to kind of do the remote thing. It has its upsides. I think we all learned a lot in a short amount of time. And I don't know that we would have been able to meet our timelines had we not gone remote. You know, being in an office setting, in an office like ours, there's lots of distractions, lots of people. And so many of our people, like we said, have dual jobs, and they're constantly being hit up for things. So I don't know that we would have hit our timeline had we been in the office. So that there is an upside to it.
Right.
Trey, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so it's something that when you're looking at a project of this size and this type, you know, you set out with an expectation of a budget, you know, number of hours that you expect to incur, and as Matt mentioned, you know, a big portion of that's your travel time, and what happened for us was when the pandemic hit, you know, we had just set up, you know, our on-premise training centers is what I'll call them, but we were just getting ready to get people in to the system. We had rooms set up at our different office locations where people could come in and touch and feel the system and do all those things, and all of a sudden that got shut down. We didn't have employees in the office. We were not able to have consultants in the office, and we had to come up with an alternative plan. And as Karla said, you know, we pivoted and we were able to manage this remotely, but it's hard to manage people when you don't see them every day, and you don't see them, you know, you can't tell if they're on, you know, they're still in the office at 9 p.m. Because they're at home on their computer, you know, plugging away and getting things done. But it's the same thing on the consultant side. You know, the consultants are also spending their time and pushing to try to achieve your goals. And while you lose some inefficiencies by not being able to be together, there's definitely some gains. This is where I think the delivery of these types of projects, you'll be able to do more from a remote perspective. I think the technology has gotten to a point, you know, whether it's Zoom or Teams or whatever platform you choose, you know, the people have evolved and have developed this new skill set to work from a remote perspective. What we were able to do was then take the dollars that we had allocated to travel and getting the consultants on site. We were able to put that into more hours of productivity, which we needed. At the end of the day, you know, this project, it's a daunting task. We're trying to manage it within, you know, scope and within budget. We were able to work with the Perficient team to kind of stay in line with where we wanted to be. You know, obviously when you put these projects together, you build in some contingency and there's some unknown and you're going to change scope. You know, I think I commend the team while we were putting in a lot of time and working remotely, we've still been able to stay within, you know, our budget. And that was one of the keys when we had to make a decision whether we were going to stick with this or pull the plug with everything going on. Our board and executive management team said, you know, we're committed to this. We need to make this change because we know it's important, and we know this pandemic is not going to last forever. And when we come out the other side, we need to be prepared. And so we had the commitment from the executive management team to push forward. But every dollar counts, especially when, you know, your businesses are not performing at the level that they had historically because of what's going on in the environment. So it was very important from us to stay in line with our project spend, and fortunately we've been able to do that. We had to, you know, we've had to make some sacrifices here and there, like everybody has. But again, at the end of the day, this has been a success, and I think we're well positioned now as you know, we're rolling out of the pandemic. We're starting to see a recovery in commodity prices, which should lead to increase in volumes that our business should be successful. And now we'll have a way to report on it and hopefully manage it.
Great. Thanks, Trey and Karla. Yeah, go ahead, Karla. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, there was nothing we couldn't do remotely, and that was, you don't think about that. You think you have to be in the office to do certain things. There was nothing we were not able to do remotely, and I attribute that to not only our team but Perficient. They were right there along with the journey with us. We couldn't have done it without them, but there was literally nothing we couldn't accomplish. On the downside, it would have been helpful to have been in the office and have, like Trey said, we built these training and testing rooms. It would have been helpful to have had groups of people in a room together testing and having face-to-face conversations. We still did it in chat rooms on Teams and Zoom, whatever you all use. That might have been a little bit of a downside to not being in person, is having to do them remote. But again, we were able to do everything we set out to do.
That's excellent, and I appreciate all that feedback. No doubt the team's working together, did a fantastic job. And we are, I feel like we could have done a 3-hour webinar because there was so much content to cover. Well, so I'm just gonna push ahead here a little bit. We want to leave at least, the intent was to leave 10 minutes for questions. It may have to go down to 5. Real quickly, I'm just gonna brush up, just talk about this slide real quickly. Look, the success of the project, as we've been talking about, isn't just one thing or another. You've got to have clear scope and support from your SI and Oracle and your customer. The Perficient, the partnership between Perficient and NGL, it has to be like one. It has to just feel like one. And obviously getting strong support from Oracle. I mean, they were in there with us all the time through the ups and downs of this project. And it seems like 1 + 1 = 2. It's not that simple, but you've got to have these factors in place here. So I'm gonna leave it at that, because I really want to get to some of the, just give Don Ford, who's been waiting patiently on the call, to talk briefly about, sorry Don, we're short of time, but go ahead and talk through, if you would, the EPM side of the house, and then we'll take questions.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. So really, just as Trey and Karla alluded to, the EPM modules are really important and vital to the success of the transformation that NGL went through. And as you can see here, when we think about consolidations, which is one of our major pillars, it was really kind of supported by a number of factors. The first, of course, being technology. Trey talked about it earlier. They really wanted kind of one consolidation app where they had one place, one single source for the truth. Second, like Perficient and NGL really collaborated to really make sure that the new business process around cloud consolidations was really kind of adapted to the people, whether they may be located, whether they were Denver or Tulsa or what business unit they were in. And then, of course, all of that was really driven and kind of governed under automation and governance, as well as, just seeking to align, the consolidation solution on cloud consolidations. The next piece, of course, was financial reporting. This was a significant aspect of the NGL solution, in the sense that really planning gave us the ability to really kind of re-strategize and relook at how reports would be consumed and distributed. And we really had a fantastic team on the NGL side that worked to initially just really catalog and identify and really align all of the reports that were being used. And then from that, we were able to kind of prioritize and drive some standardization across the various business units. And then that drove ultimately our end user alignment, where both, whether from a physical CAN report standpoint or ad hoc, we had a number of tools available to us on the platform that really drove the consumption alignment of end users to those standardized and ad hoc reports. And that really created a foundation for end user enablement, which now you have, as again, we think about self-service, a lot of users who are using cloud EPM planning specifically to grab and get whatever financial information they desire, whether it be budget or actuals or consolidated, eliminated actuals. The last pillar of the EPM solution, in terms of what we've delivered so far, is around enterprise data management. So because cloud ERP and financial consolidations and planning all leverage the same metadata set. We use EDM to really encapsulate and really drive the management of all of that metadata. So when you think about the ability to add new accounts, to add new cost centers, and then have a very request-driven process to really give NGL that governance and that control over all their hierarchies across the enterprise, and then be able to push and synchronize those metadata upgrades across all of the cloud applications they deploy, that was a real win for NGL. And we were really, happy that this was another one of the key aspects from a business process standpoint that was made better with their adoption of Oracle EPM.
Great, thanks, Don. I think we're at the point now. I'm going to end our presentation here. Susan, are there questions from the audience, because we really want to give them the benefit of trying to answer at least a couple of them.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, as Matt mentioned, we have a few moments here just for Q&A. We have a couple of questions that have come in. So Matt, I'll go ahead and ask those, but this is your time to go ahead and put your questions in the chat window. If we don't have or in the question tab rather, if we do not have an opportunity to get to your question today, please do go ahead though and enter those questions. We'll make sure that we get back with you. We know this is a really important topic. These transformational stories are critical stories. They're big projects, and I'm sure that you all have questions. So with that, I'll go ahead and ask the first one here that did come in, Matt. It's why did NGL select Oracle's ERP cloud product? So it looks like they're asking, as opposed to upgrading to eBusiness Suite or moving EBS into the cloud as a hosted service, did NGL have other options that they looked at?
Gotcha. I think Trey or Karla best to answer that one.
Yeah, I'll take it, Matt, and Karla, please chime in. We did look at other options. Obviously, we were on a very dated version of EBS. We also were on a Microsoft AX platform that we evaluated. We looked at other large systems like an SAP. At the end of the day, and I think I mentioned this earlier, we wanted to get as out of the box as possible. We wanted to have best practices across our businesses, and we didn't want to give people an excuse or a reason to deviate from those best practices. So we thought going to the cloud, where you're limited in the amount of customization when it comes to things like processes, would be beneficial to us. Again, we wanted to limit the amount of customization that we would have, but we want to stay on the cutting edge. We consulted with our IT group on what their preference was, whether they wanted on-premise versus cloud. You obviously have to weigh the economics of the decision as well. And at the end of the day, this was the best fit for NGL. Everybody has to make those decisions themselves. We had been using Oracle previously, so that was a benefit, I would say, in choosing Oracle, sticking with Oracle and going to the cloud. But those were some of the factors that weighed in our decision. And I think it is unique for each company. Everybody kind of has to look at their own situation, and sometimes you want a total change and move away from the platform you may be on. Or you want to stick with some consistency. So those are things that are unique to everybody.
Great, thanks, Trey. Any other, Susan?
It looks like we have another question here. This one is from George. George is asking, can you provide some examples of efficiencies that help to streamline the financial close cycle?
Karla, you want to start, or you want me to give a couple?
I'll let you start and I'll chime in.
Okay. So George, appreciate the question. So what we're seeing at this point in time is that by having all of our data in one location, we can generate reports much quicker than what we've been able to historically. One of the things that really drives your financial close is being able to close your revenue and your expenditure processes. Those are still from a business perspective are still managed and we use right angle, for example, in our liquids business, or we use custom built system in our water business for volumes. You still have to get those systems closed, which does take several days generally after the end of a month. So that's not going to impact, you're not going to see that any benefit there, or we have not yet from an Oracle Cloud perspective. But getting all that data into one place has allowed us to accelerate some of our reporting. Now, that being said, again, we're 4 months in. There's a big learning curve in the new system. So each month we're getting better. I think we will ultimately be able to shave a day or two off of our close process, so to speak, to close the books. But at the end of the day, having real-time reporting is going to be a significant benefit, where we don't have to generate reports on just a monthly basis. We can get some real-time information out of the system, and then being able to essentially close the reporting process for each month on a much quicker basis will help expedite and give us more time to analyze. A lot of times we spend as accountants so much time accumulating the information that we don't really get a chance to step back and look at it and say, does this all make sense? And that's where I think we'll get the major benefit.
Great, thanks, Trey. Any others, Susan?
Yes, we have one more here. This one is from William. William wants to know, how do you handle enhancements and customization changes? Does Oracle Cloud provide a development environment before migrating those changes to production?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good one for me to answer. So, a lot of people say or think, hey, there's just no customizations in the cloud. I would say in the traditional sense, there aren't quote unquote customizations in the cloud, as you really can't touch the code or the software directly. But there's what's called platform as a service, where you can build custom applications of your own and then integrate it, calling what's called the web services through, this might be a little technical, even for me it's a little technical, REST APIs or SOAP web services that insert data into the environment and pull data out. So that's how you might integrate a custom application, or you can integrate an existing legacy, such as NGL is doing with a few of their operational systems, where customer bills are being generated and then being imported into the cloud. So, but any type of if you need to do form enhancements, there are ways to do personalizations in the traditional sense that we used to do in EBS, and most of the things that we have found you can do, and this is not our first cloud project. This is one of many, and we have yet to meet a challenge that we honestly just could not fill.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, and Matt, just to add into that, yeah, I think they asked, yes, we have a dev, a test, and a production environment, and Matt can probably speak to better how they divvy those out and if that comes along with the number of user licenses, but we have plenty of environments to do our development and test efforts. And then just to plug Perficient a little bit, for those monthly and quarterly updates, I neglected to say this earlier. As part of the cloud concierge services, Perficient met with our team and gave us an overview and a PowerPoint deck and took us through all of the updates for the quarterly release for ERP, which was a huge benefit to us, because if you've seen them, the release notes are fairly large and detailed, and to get through them, it's quite a lot. So that's a service that Perficient provides with the Cloud Concierge, is to give you an update on the quarterly releases.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Karla. Thanks for reminding me. Sorry, I forgot to mention the test platforms that Oracle does provide. Yes, when you subscribe to the product, Oracle gives you, production environment, a test environment, and then optionally a development environment. You can buy as many as you want. Usually, we find you shouldn't need more than 2, 3 at the max. And then the code, kind of going back to the technical question, the code does not sit resonant in any one of those environments. It sits in the integration layer. So, whether it's MuleSoft or Dell Boomi, or we have an integration platform of our own that is based on Python type code. The code really exists there. It's just a matter of where you point it. So I know it's a little technical, but hopefully that helps close out the answer to that question. Happy to talk more about it though offline if that person would like to speak with us.
Thank you, Matt and Karla. We've kept you a couple of minutes past the top of the hour, and I do realize that everyone probably has another meeting to go to. So I'll go ahead and close the event at this time, but I'll just take this moment to thank Trey and Karla so much. We truly appreciate when a story is told from the customer directly. I mean, there's nothing quite like having the customer share in their own words what their transformation has been like, what their challenges are and were, what they're experiencing now as a part of this move from on-prem to the cloud. And it's just, as a marketer, quite honestly, it's one of the best things that I can ever ask for is when a customer is willing to graciously give us their time and share their story in this manner. So thank you for that. We really, truly do appreciate it. Matt and Dawn, our directors from the Perficient practices, I want to thank you for your time today as well. And as a reminder to those folks still on the line, we will have a recording of today's event that we can share, as well as the slide deck that you can share with colleagues. And I can go ahead and keep this session open a little bit longer if you have questions you'd like to put in the chat window, and that way we can get back to you directly offline after today's event. So with that, I'll close today's event. Thank you all very much.